really a delay. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. It is 9 a.m. on June 3rd, 2020. If you would, please rise with me and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a line of duty or casualty report, Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to read something that won't take very long and I think is related to everything that the country has faced and facing. An alleged threat by a well-known group of anarchists to take down and burn one of America's largest flags in the state yesterday prompted a large number of Josephine County residents to respond to protect Old Glory and South Grants Pass. Dozens of local residents, many of them legally armed, gathered at the foot of the flag between Grants Pass Hood and Les Schwab Tires on Monday afternoon, and some stayed there throughout the night. The unconfirmed threat reportedly came from a group known as Antifa, which has been known to arrive in Oregon communities to turn peaceful protest into violent anti-government demonstrations. Meanwhile, a group of young people in Josephine County have organized a vigil and stand of solidarity for Black lives. At noon today at the courthouse in Grants Pass, a press release issued by the group said, "We will not tolerate any acts of violence." Law enforcement agencies in Josephine County, including the Grants Pass Department of Public Safety and Sheriff's Office, said they are prepared for peaceful demonstration today, but will also be ready if the protest becomes not so peaceful. Grants Pass Public Safety Chief Warren Hensman said he wants to reassure the community they abhor the reprehensible actions and tactics demonstrated in those sentiments, calling the actions and tactics used by Minneapolis officers reprehensible, inhumane, and outright criminal. Both Chief Hensman and Sheriff Daniels, Josephine County Sheriff, said that they will not be distracted from their law enforcement missions and encourage local residents to stand up to outside influences that would otherwise negatively impact our lives. I wrote to Josephine County Commissioners to ask if this was true. Here's a response I got from Commissioner Dowler. Yes, flag vigil last night. I just drove through the protest, 250 so Black Lives Matter in front of the courthouse, 150 counter-protesters on the opposite side. Not much social distancing. Pretty peaceful, good law enforcement presence, interesting times. So, Mr. Chair, we need to reach out to everybody. Public officials, citizens, everyone in our county. We need to take a deep breath, standing for George Floyd, standing for justice, standing for the rule of law, standing for peace, maybe the avoidance of civil war. You see what, thank God it was peaceful in Josephine County yesterday. We need to stand up for the United States of America. Most importantly, I think we need to stand up and take a breath for all of our law enforcement communities that are under incredibly increasing risk. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if we could have a moment of silence.
Okay, but in the meantime, did you have a line of duty?
No, that's it. I'll do that next week. Thank you for asking. So a moment of silence, if we may. Thank you, Board.
Do I have any amendments to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, do we have an executive session? Yes, we do, so we're good. Thank you.
Yes, we have 4. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to be asking the board, we're going to pull D and E from 6, adopting a position description, a new position for a safety officer and a new hire. We're going to pull those off from this meeting, and they'll be brought back. Anything else?
Do you have consent on that?
I'm fine with that.
Me too, thank you.
That's what I was asking the board. Is that all right?
I
So,
didn't catch that, sorry.
I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
I have, if I may?
Yes.
Chair, just want to add a proclamation, declaration for June is Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Month, and I didn't get that to the board in time for Friday, but I put one on your desk, and I think it's something that the board is likely to want to approve. And I can read that later if you like. Perhaps immediately after the presentation.
That might be a good time, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
No, you made.
Oh,
the
you
first.
mean for the agenda, sure.
For the amended agenda, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. I will second.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Mr. Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Paasch.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, next, we're going to have a public comment from Miss Mary Rowe. Good morning, Miss Rowe.
These in case I get really upset, making the public talk my exes. I'm Mary Rowe. I have a couple of suggestions about the Citizens Revenue Task Force. However, the copy of the proposed order that I was given from the packet on Monday does not have an order number. Social workers understand that it is important when developing any plan to include some representation of those who will be affected. Commissioner Paasch, who called for a task force comprised of business people, partially understood this important principle when he stated that he wanted business people such as moteliers and representatives of jurisdictions such as our courts to be included. However, he left out an important group in such representation. That group includes the many precious citizens referred to by David Barnes in his public comment at the May 27th workshop. They are the hardworking people earning low wages and raising their children, our elders living on Social Security while trying to pay medical expenses, disabled people trying to function enough to survive and be part of things to whatever extent they can, renters often living in fear of becoming homeless, and even homeless folks trying to stay alive and be recognized as part of the community. In short, our citizens who live on the edge due to their low incomes. We need to be careful that these community members are not pushed over the edge by any revenue gathering strategy. So it makes sense to have a designated task force position for a representative of low-income citizens. Of course, 5 positions isn't many, and probably not enough to set aside one position for such representation. For that matter, 5 positions doesn't provide much representation of other groups. A 7-member task force would make more sense, provide greater representation, and be capable of coming up with more ideas for generating revenue. Thus, I am asking you to please change the order before you vote today to include 7 members on our revenue task force and to designate one of those positions for representation of low-income residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rowe.
Thanks, Mary.
All right, next we have a presentation from Commissioner Boyce on PTSD and Detective Mello. Good morning, Ms. Mello.
So I'm going to give a trigger warning first. I'm not used to doing that, but the things that I'll discuss are going to be probably violent and upsetting. So if you're sensitive to that, it might be a good idea not to listen. I'm Maya Mello, and I'm a detective with the Curry County Sheriff's Office and the law enforcement representative for the Curry County Suicide Awareness and Prevention Council. When I was brand new to law enforcement, a number of jaded veteran officers told me that I shouldn't expect to make a difference doing this job. Because I am my mother's daughter, I remember thinking in response, watch me. In 2017, I intervened in a suicide in progress. A disabled wife called 911 to report that her elderly husband shot himself in the neck. The wife reported that he was still trying to take his life with a knife. I was the only officer on duty that night and less than 30 seconds away from the residence when the call came out. Although I would have been within policy to stage and wait for backup units to respond with me, I chose to enter alone. I knew I could never have waited outside that home, knowing that someone inside needed my help. I absolutely knew what my job was in that moment. Number 1, to preserve life, and number 2, to not let that lady be alone in what would most certainly be the most harrowing moments of her life. Once inside, I found the male covered in blood with a knife and a bullet wound to the neck. After making sure the weapons were not within reach, I put pressure on the man's neck while he struggled against me. He taunted me and wiped blood all over my bare hands, arms, and neck in an attempt to get me to release him. The next 5 or so minutes were the longest of my life as I wrestled this very single-minded opponent. When backup and medics finally arrived, I was winded, sweating, and covered in his blood. He ultimately survived, but I had mixed feelings about things after. On one hand, I knew that the man had suffered a great deal of physical pain on a daily basis. I acknowledged that by surviving with additional injuries, his health issues would be further compounded. On the other hand, I knew his wife was grateful for my intercession. She had not been left to deal with this incident alone. She kept in touch with me over the next few years and thanked me often for responding quickly that night and for giving her husband time to say goodbye to family and loved ones before passing away a few months later. She even wrote a letter to my administration commending me for my quick response and bravery. I investigated a kidnapping case last year where the victim was able to turn her phone on and video record her abduction. It was chilling. The suspect terrorized her as he drove her into an unfamiliar neighborhood. She begged and pleaded and cried to be let go. She finally escaped by being willing to jump out of a moving vehicle and run to strangers for help. My victim was terrified that she wouldn't be believed and didn't report the incident initially. I knew I had to do a great job for that victim because she put her trust in me. Her abuser was ultimately convicted. Throughout that investigation, my own memories and fears about a similar experience that I survived years ago resurfaced. Years ago, after an extensive argument, my boyfriend invited me to go on a walk with him to make up. I agreed, and just as I got outside my barracks building, I was grabbed by my boyfriend and a friend of his and carried away. It was mid-afternoon on a bustling army base, and I couldn't believe all the soldiers out on the quad that day just watched as I begged them for help. I struggled so violently that my captors dropped me and my head struck the pavement hard. After regaining control of me, they shoved me into the cab of a pickup idling at the curb. My boyfriend jumped in the driver's seat and drove away while the other guy held the door closed and ran along beside us until we were going too fast. My boyfriend told me, "Hold on because I'm not stopping at stop signs," before proceeding to run the first one we came to. I remember glancing over my left shoulder at him as I opened the door. The ground rushed by below my feet and he shouted, "I'm going 45, you better not jump." Because I am my mother's daughter, I said to myself, "Watch me," before pushing out of the cab of that truck and hitting the pavement. Frequently, my own past traumas recur because of the type of the case I am working on. Vivid memories interrupt other thoughts. I dream about my traumatic experiences or the traumatic experiences my victims have relayed to me. I feel anxious, but the worst thing that I experience is sleeplessness brought on by the worry that I am not enough to make a difference in the lives of the victims I meet. Although I have never been formally diagnosed with PTSD, I understand that the feelings and experiences I just described are consistent with some of the known symptoms and manifestations of PTSD. The National Center for PTSD says that one study examined all suicide deaths from 1994 to 2006 and found that persons with PTSD had 5.3 times the rate of death from suicide than persons without PTSD. Because of stats like these, I have educated myself about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and know that if things begin to overwhelm me, there are resources for me. I know that I am not alone. I do this job because I want others to know that they are also not alone. The Curry County Suicide Awareness and Prevention Council believes that with teamwork, we can reduce the number of suicides in Curry County by spreading awareness of the mental health issues people face and directing them to the proper resources to address those issues. Working with the members of the council has made me realize that it is not just a few fighting against suicide, but an army. Our goal of 0 attempts is daunting, but like any other challenge in my life, my response is watch me. I ask that the Board of Commissioners recognize June as PTSD Awareness Month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Detective. Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Another time to take a deep breath. Detective Mello, thank you very much for your courage. Thank you that you had the courage to jump out of that vehicle at that time. Thank you for your service on the Suicide Awareness and Prevention Council for Curry County. Thank you for serving as a deputy and a detective. Such an important, critical role. Your story, I think, to the people that hear it, and hopefully will hear it in the future, will do more to bring this county together. And I just extend tremendous gratitude for your coming today. Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I'll read. This could be a proclamation or a resolution. Excuse me.
We do something else. I'd like to ask Mr. Clay to step up, please.
Gordon Clay. Welcome.
I told him I'm going to race him down the hallway and see who wins.
What a contest.
For the record, my name is Gordon Clay from Brookings, Oregon, the chair of the Suicide Awareness and Prevention Council. June is PTSD Awareness Month. When this topic is broached, most people think of veterans. What needs to be understood is anyone can be impacted severely with PTSD, and this pandemic is showing just how widespread PTSD is for our healthcare workers, law enforcement, and our fellow citizens who have been laid off or furloughed. With the inclusion of questions in the Advanced Childhood Experience Survey being added to the Pride surveys for the Curry County 6th, 8th, and 11th graders in 2014, 16, and 18, we're just beginning to realize how many of our youth are suffering from PTSD as well. And this pandemic is upping the ante, so we must learn the warning signs for depression and suicide, which is the main precursor for many of the youth suicides, and make it a point to connect with our kids on a daily basis. What adverse childhood experience? What are those experiences? ACEs is a term used to describe neglect, abuse, violence, and or distressed family environments that children under the age of 18 may experience. The culminative effect of ACEs can be traumatic, especially if experienced repeatedly beginning at a young age. There is a strong association between the amount of ACEs and individual experience during childhood and the increased risk for negative health behaviors, smoking, drug and alcohol abuse, and risky sexual behaviors, chronic mental health concerns like depression and suicidal thoughts, and chronic diseases like heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and cancer later in life. The CDC shows the questionnaire with 10 types of childhood trauma and the percent of population it each has. Household substance abuse, parental separation and divorce, family member with a mental illness, violence between parents, abuse of mother, incarcerated household member, psychological or emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, and physical neglect. In the 2018 Pride survey, Curry County youth outpaced the average Oregon school district in all 3 grade levels and every single one of the questions except one. It is especially important during this pandemic to minimize the stigma about talking about PTSD and mental health and become aware of the warning signs for mental illness, anxiety, depression, suicide, youth suicide, abuse and domestic violence, drug and alcohol abuse, and take the self-check quiz, all of which can be found at zeroattempts.org/warning-signs.html. Raising awareness of this condition is necessary to remove the stigma and to encourage those suffering to seek proper and timely treatment that may save their life, and reach out to their friends, neighbors, colleagues, and especially family members to provide support. And let's get through this pandemic together. I want to read 3 statistics. In 2018, which is the last survey for Curry County, 8th graders, 59% were from divorced households in our county. 58% lived with a problem drinker, and 49% lived with somebody who was mentally ill. And in the area of going to school with dirty clothes, it was 25%. Going to school with hungry, 19%. That's our kids. So on the chart that I gave you, the little chart on the side talks about the number of students in Curry County that represent those names. So we've really got, particularly with the pandemic, these kids are isolated. They had They felt safe going to school. It was a place that was safety. Now they're not there. They're home all the time in those circumstances. So I hope you approve the proclamation to make June PTSD Awareness Month. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner?
Thank you. If you don't mind me reading it, you bet. Real quick back to law enforcement, sometimes we forget the psychological stress that they're under, the mental, physical, not to excuse any bad behavior, but sometimes it's relational, it's financial, all the capacities that affect their ability to serve. Never want to forget that, especially we've never walked in their shoes. Gordon, thank you for your card. The work you've done on the Citizens Awareness, Suicide Awareness and Prevention Committee has been incredible. What I've learned, what I expect to learn in the future is invaluable, and then that effort we can all make to better inform the public, better become aware. Again, Mr. Chair, I don't know if this should be a proclamation or a resolution the board can decide, but I did get Detective Mello and Gordon's preliminary approval on this, and it's fairly short, even though it is in pretty big print. Whereas post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, can occur after a person experiences trauma, including but not limited to the stress of combat, rape, sexual assault, child abuse, bombings, accidents, and natural disasters, and affects approximately 8 million adults in the United States annually. And whereas PTSD is associated with chemical changes in the body's hormonal system and autonomic nervous system, and is characterized by symptoms including flashbacks, nightmares, insomnia, avoidance, hypervigilance, anxiety, and depression. And whereas between 10 and 30% of service members will develop PTSD within a year of leaving combat, while others may not develop symptoms until years later. And whereas over 25% of people who have had a diagnosis of PTSD at some point in their lifetime also have attempted suicide. I want to repeat that one. Over 25% of people who have had a diagnosis of PTSD at some point in their lifetime also have attempted suicide. Whereas children who have had adverse childhood experiences are at greater risk of having seriously considered suicide. And whereas despite its treatability, many cases of PTSD remain undiagnosed and untreated due to lack of awareness of this condition and the persistent stigma associated with mental health conditions. And finally, whereas raising awareness of this condition is necessary to remove the stigma and to encourage those suffering to seek proper and timely treatment that may save their lives. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the month of June each year is designated as PTSD Awareness Month to bring awareness to those with this disease and to encourage people to reach out to their fellow citizens to provide support and remove the stigma associated with this disorder. Thank you again, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Detective Mello, again. Great courage.
Do I have a motion?
Also move, Mr. Chair.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes.
Chair Paasch.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda. A, business meeting, minutes for the business meeting for April 29th. B, promotion of an employee, Amy Barnard from Rhodes. C, promotion of an employee, Charles Gage from Rhodes. F, OHA 2019 through 21 IGA Agreement 159808 Amendment Number 12 amended and restated. And G, forming a new CTRF Citizens Revenue Task Force.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as was amended.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes.
Chair Paasch.
All right.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, moving on to 7A. Curry Board of Commissioners proposed resolution to adopt the Jackson County Board of Commissioners Challenge Letter, May 15th, 2020, for the Fair Care Corona Aid Relief and Economic Security Act funding distribution to all 36 Oregon counties. Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You've read the letters, very well written. You know that I follow Jackson and Douglas County and their efforts, considerable. You know, the basics of this are so that the state of Oregon in the CARES Reimbursement Act treat all counties fairly. And I think we all share a big concern for the companies, our businesses, our employees that have been affected by this disease may not come back. And we just want that flexibility and that freedom to help them any way we can. And that would go above and beyond the actual specific cost of us protecting our citizens with the COVID-19 responsibilities. I said the letters are well written. I don't think they're perfectly written, but I think they are a good representation of Curry County, and I would encourage the board to consider adopting their letters as our approach. And I think I would come back fairly soon to the board and say, you know, other than Peter Courtney, Senate President, Tina Kotek, Speaker of the House, certainly the governor's staff, there's two or three people in particular within her office that have considerable authority to determine for the smaller counties especially. But I think we might want to put this, if the board agrees, in the form of a ruling or even a resolution, and authorize our staff to, or myself, to get this to those people, and I would provide specific addresses to the board that I recommend. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Gold?
So I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Would you, I would propose, and I would be behind doing our own letter. There are lots of things in these letters that make sense, but I think it has to come from us rather than from another county. That's how I feel.
Or we could do something like we, Curry County, enjoin the thoughts of Jackson County and agree with. You know,
That would be fine as long as we have their permission to do so, and I totally agree that we should be forming some sort of an alliance with the other counties. So.
Absolutely. I think we all agree that there's strength in numbers, Commissioner Boyce. So I don't know if we should just enjoin this letter with their permission, add that Curry County would like to join them in their language of this letter, or write our own letter.
That's why today, very good, that's why today was preliminary, and get some clear direction from the board. I think we have that. And I agree, Douglas County, they reached out to all 5 counties. I did considerable work in that and with them, and so we seem to be in very strong agreement that a collective effort is the best way to go. So if I understand correctly, you, the board, would like to have a Curry County addition to supporting these 2 letters. We have a Jackson County permission. I can verify that, and I think that's a good approach, wise approach. Thank you.
Okay.
So I understand correctly? Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, as long as it makes cogent sense to me.
We need a formal vote on that, Council, or?
It's always good just to, you could probably take just a all in, you know, an ayes and nays. I don't think you need a roll call vote, but
So-
a vote would be good.
Mr. Chair, I will make that motion that we adopt the Jackson County Board of Commissioners letter of January 15th, and then the subsequent AOC letter for the CARES Act, equitable and fair funding for all 36 Oregon counties. And a little bit of detail on the letter that it is, I think the word you use is adjoined.
Right.
So good, thank you.
Okay, I would agree with that.
Okay.
All right, we're going to move on to 7B, 2020 Curry Catastrophic Fire Awareness and Prevention Teleconference Meeting, pre-Curry County Board of Commissioners discussion presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have what was going to be somewhat of an informal teleconference tomorrow has turned into something with a little more energy, a little more interest. AOC has offered to assist. I've put a call-in information on your desk. Could be 100 or 200 people. One of my friends sent me a link to, or suggested I look at the weather. Next week might rain all week. And so I'm not sure how I feel about that, but except, yeah, initially very happy. But what does it mean for Curry County fire? Where does it mean an extended fall? But we're not even going to be in fire season now with the rain we had Saturday until probably middle of June, which is good news. But as you know, I'm encouraging the citizens through this participation in the conference call and just general awareness, fire chiefs, Forest Service, BLM. Very happy that Glenn Casamasa, the Region 6, Oregon, Washington, Forester has agreed to call in and offered to call in. And, you know, just the work in preparing, informing our citizens, pulling everybody together. And yeah, we'd love to be wrong that it's not going to be necessarily an intense fire season, but when COVID-19 and fire season collide, it has a lot of people very concerned. And then in addition to that, Mr. Chair, I learned yesterday that the Coos Forest Protective Association, I see Roadmaster Christensen in the audience. He is probably aware of this too, that their budget, they're being asked to cut $640,000 for this season, and that's devastating. The timing is horrible, and it's essentially across the board throughout Oregon. So we're going to be battling to not see those budget cuts come to pass. Those are fierce firefighters, and so anyway, we're going to be talking about all this tomorrow. I encourage you to join in. I encourage the citizens to join in. Easy call-in information. It will go 1 hour. Rogue Siskiyou National Forest Supervisor will be the leadoff speaker, and then Mike Robinson, Dave Larson, or Dave Lorenz from the Oregon Department of Forestry, firefighting teams. So I want the citizens to know, we, just to be reminded, we all sometimes get complacent that we could be headed for a very intense fire season. And if it truly rains all next week, I might be happy to eat those words. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I was sure glad to see the rain the other day. I was a little nervous about the lightning, but the rain, hard rain, came after. So
Roseburg got almost 2 inches.
We got 1.24 inches at the ranch. We have a public comment from Mr. Barnes. Morning, sir.
Morning, David Barnes. I'm kind of, I don't know, maybe if this isn't the right time to ask this question, but I'm kind of confused about what the reporting line looks like now for a fire in Curry County. Who has authority to act on behalf of the county? Who has authority to speak? I know that a couple of weeks ago there was a change in liaison assignments, and Commissioner Paasch, you are now the liaison to the Emergency Services and Sheriff's Department, and I know that they are both part of the chain of command should there be a fire. And I'm curious as to, I hear Commissioner Boyce talking about having fire meetings and bringing all these people in, and I've heard Commissioner Boyce, we all have on numerous occasions, say that if there's another fire in this county, people better stay out of his way. And I'm kind of curious as to what the chain of command in the county and what county response is, and if from what I'm hearing, I'd like to hear Commissioner Boyce explain what he means when he says stay out of his way. Because to me, I have to see that as being a threat to interrupt the chain of command for his own personal purposes. And, I think that before a fire starts is really the time to address that threat. So, I was wondering if you all might have a conversation about what the chain of command and line of authority is here. Thank you.
Commissioner Boyce, did you want to respond first?
You go first.
Well, I'm just breaking into some of this with with Jeremy Dumar. My idea of the chain of command is the sheriff is the head of the chain of command here, and the relationships that he has with different fire authorities around the county and the state. The sheriff is the #1 law enforcement person in this county, and most of the decisions that will be made will go through him in his office. Mr. Dumar will be directed through his own, through what he does as emergency services, but he will also take direction from the sheriff and fire authorities. So, I think relationships are important, and I do know that Commissioner Boyce has relationships through a lifetime of friendships as well with a lot of people in fire in the county. But we need to have a chain of command, as I believe from my family's military background. And the chain of command starts with Sheriff Ward, in my opinion. Will I do all I can do, and I'm sure this board do if he asks us to? Absolutely.
Okay,
But he will lead and we will follow his direction.
thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, the sheriff's been invited and is going to do everything he can to call into this meeting, and I made sure he was notified from the beginning. I watched him work at both the Chetco Bar, especially, not so much the county offices. He had, the sheriff's department was very well, in the Klondike. The sheriff's department was very well represented. You know, I was there every morning, without exception, maybe one for 100 and some days. And yes, I've built these relationships, and that's going to benefit this county around the state. And no, I'm not going to be silenced for political reasons because of, you know, we can go into that today if you like, but, you know, I know my responsibility. I know why the people elected me, and I understand the fire risk in this area, and I'm collecting people that understand it even way better than myself, professionals from around the country. And if this county can't come together based on the 3 years that I've served on this, including the Governor's Fire Response Council, then that would definitely be a political decision. And me to be moved off the emergency management liaison was political in my view. So I'm going to stay focused. I would encourage you to be on the call. And anybody else that needs updated information, and we may have another one. And I cannot thank AOC enough for their willingness, free of charge, to facilitate this meeting. And yeah, it's grown. And again, I'm hoping likely that it will develop interest in other parts of the state. And that's good for Curry County, and it's good for fire awareness. Yes?
I'm waiting.
Okay. So if the chain of command is to tell me for the citizens that you're not in the loop any longer, and I just think that would be tragic. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Counsel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the chain of command, of course, is established in our emergency operation plan, and so that's all in a document. This looks like really an open house or a town hall or something like that. There has been no emergency declared right now, so this document here doesn't even really impact the chain of command at all. It's just a town hall. So and then once emergencies are declared, if you're familiar with that, but when we declare emergency, we're actually asking for help from outside agencies, and then they come in and actually run the show through our designated people in our EOP. But at the same time, those agencies control, who's in the room at their meetings at that time. So partly it's the chain of command is above our heads a little bit. So anyhow, that's really all there is to it. I just wanted to put that down. So there's, that's how I think it runs. And I think it kind of confirms everything we've talked about.
Okay. My question remains, Commissioner Boyce, you've made the statement numerous times that people better stay out of your way, and I was hoping that you might clarify that for us.
One time I made that statement, and that was based on the decision was made to take me out of the emergency management liaison. That should not have happened. It's unacceptable. I'm going to have to accept that. I will stand on my record with 2 years of major catastrophic fires in this county where I was there every day and thoroughly inspected the higher agencies that couldn't wait to work with me every day. And what I learned and what I was able to contribute on a small basis compared to what they brought to the table, I'm preparing my county for a major fire. We could have lost Brookings so easy. This conversation doesn't need to take any more time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Wow.
Said it one time.
Wow. No, I've heard you say it 3 times in this room, sir, since April 22nd.
I'm not going to get into debate
Point
with
of
him.
order. Sure, that's good.
All right, so I did also notice, I wanted to make a comment on here that Merv George is going to be on the agenda here, and I just want to make a comment that I was down in Central California last week to see my granddaughter and my daughter, and happened to run into a guy at a gas station, and we were talking. He said he saw the Oregon plates, and did I know a guy named Merv George? And I said, yeah, actually, he's a force supervisor. He said, yeah. He said, I've known him for a few years. He said he's got I won't say what he said he had. He said to clean it up, he's the most aggressive, nice guy he's ever met in his life, and that's as good as I can clean it up.
But it was a compliment.
We're lucky to have him, is what he said.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Couldn't agree more.
All right, so next we are going to go to C, better planning for building. And I just wanted to make some comments on this. Our roadmaster is, Mr. Christensen, earns A-pluses with me for your work and your foresight in the community here. And he invited me to go on a road trip with him the other day and locked me in a truck with him for 5 hours.
5 hours.
But it was very insightful. He showed me a lot of the projects that they're working on, why they're doing it, and the need from the county, the planning that he does, and the constant work to get grant funding and the dollars to afford that, to save the reserves that we have. And he showed me one parcel up behind Precision that there's a housing development going on up there. And I just want to basically comment generally because he brought up a point that had he been involved or other people been involved in that project in its infancy, that they might have been able to get around doing, or they would have had better planning on how weather and other things would affect that property. And we started talking about that a little bit. And basically on this particular property, it was the way the water's going to run off the hills behind and through another property down into this new development, and how the storm drains, if they didn't put them in, because if I recall, you said they weren't planned to be put in. With no storm drains, this water was literally going to run right into the homes that were below it. So they had to all of a sudden come in behind and put storm drains in. So we talked about the possibility of having a check sheet when planning. When someone wants to come in and develop things like this. I've always been one of those that thinks that anything over 5 or 6 homes, the sheriff's department should be made aware of as well, because he's going to have to find the ingress and egress points of those places in an emergency. He needs to know that he has deputies in that area to be able to patrol it properly. So these are all things that I think we could do better planning on. So I just wanted to have a conversation. I don't know if we should maybe have a workshop where planning and permitting and those kind of things have foresight into this, so that we can come up with a checklist that this is what's going to happen, and just have different people that understand where water's going to go, how roads are going to be built, how the storm drains are going to be built, how fires are going to possibly be formed in the area, and the outcomes of that, that different people could look at and come up with reasons why to or why not to. That would be attached to the plans so that everybody gets a check off on that. Commissioner Gold?
Let me just add a couple of things. I think the fire is very important. Also, schools could be impacted, and I'm thinking of the possible proposed 1,000 homes there in Lone Ranch. And I think before any of that gets approved, we need to look at all of these things, because it could be impacting other areas.
So what I'd like to propose is, the board, maybe ask Ms. Schmelzer when she gets back to come up with a questionnaire that she would send out to all departments and pick 2 or 3 things that you think should be looked at as a property is being built, say over three homes on a plan. That way there, an individual home is probably not going to affect, but when you get a road that has 2 or 3 homes in a row on it, now you could start to have some erosion issues. You can start to have a lot of those problems that are unforeseen. So at least it helps to protect the citizens who are going to purchase those properties, that they know that they've been properly, planned. And I'm not picking on anyone. I'm just saying it's the more eyes on something, maybe the better it is. And I don't know if you want to comment on any of this. But I think it's a great idea to have the sheriff just kind of look at things, to have the road department look at things, maybe have, I don't know, a couple different departments look at some of this.
Sure, it's an excellent topic. Just so a little bit of background, for any project that would be 3 houses or larger, the planning department requires the applicant do a pre-application conference, and that's the point in time we go through a list and we notify all of the public agencies that would be involved, like the fire districts, the wastewater district. The road department almost always attends the pre-application meeting. That's the point in time where everybody says, here's what our expectations are. That process seems to work pretty well. The place the process starts to break down is when those requirements are actually put as conditions onto an applicant. And you've seen applicants come forward to certain commissioners and say, do I really have to do this? This is going to cost me a lot of money. And it does get a little dicey when, it comes down to actual implementation of what was talked about early on in those discussions, because it means money for the contractor, for the owner of the property. And we did see that with this subdivision that was just north of town here. And we do have a situation now where the property owner and the developer are having issues financially. So the question is, are they going to complete the conditions that were originally put on the application? It's a difficult issue to get implementation. I don't think it's difficult, and we do a good job communicating up front on these projects.
I just, I think to be proactive on some of this, though, there has to be a point, maybe once the groundwork is done, the road has been roughed in, the parcels have been roughed in, that someone goes back and looks and says, okay, yeah, we saw this on paper, but now here it is in front of our eyes. And maybe to make it mandatory that before the project can proceed to construction, that it has to get signed off again by by 2 or 3, 5 people. I don't know how we can work that out. And I'm guessing we should maybe have a and just all talk about this and how it would be best planned. But, our jobs are to protect the public, and it's not only the people that are going to build these projects, but it's the people that are going to purchase those homes not only now, but 5, 10, 20, 50 years from now, that they know that their money is well spent, that the project, it was done to code and it was done properly. Honestly, when we first pulled around the corner, and you mentioned that, look at that hillside there, what can you see? It was like a ton of bricks just hit you. I mean, this whole hillside of water is just going to come down into these houses. And luckily someone caught it and it's done now and it's fixed. But I would like to maybe have the board to plan a workshop for, later in June and invite different departments and let's all sit down and talk about it. It'd be great. We can come up with some kind of a plan that we approach to be able to address this and protect the public.
I'm going to have to agree that that's a good idea, because I think we need to be proactive rather than waiting for mudslides, et cetera, to happen. And I think it's important that people know that we want their homes to be safe. And that's why we require permits and so forth in the county.
All right, so we're in consensus. I'm sorry, Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you see by chance the drain that's about twice the size of this room and perimeter would be at the southeast corner of Shore Acres Assisted Living? It has one 12-inch drain line going in, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it has 2 12-inch drain lines going out. And so, Rogue Hills was built in the late 50s, early 60s. Never been a mudslide there. Careful planning, who isn't in favor of that? My concern, Mr. Chair, is, and you just heard Director Crockett mention in an indirect way, but I certainly understood, when developers are discouraged with a housing shortage, you talk about a public safety health issue when you have homeless people, and we have a housing issue. What I'm hearing, and I hope I'm hearing wrong, that we're actually looking for more regulations, more requirements, more discouragement of development. I just think that we cannot afford that if we take it. We have state planning guidelines, we have Curry County planning guidelines, we have an excellent planning department, and an excellent planning group, planning board that works very hard. So I just want to have a little caution here that the 33 homes are being built there. They have done an incredible job. I don't want them to hear this meeting and sense that they overlooked something that could have had serious consequences. I don't believe that to be true. And again, I want them to be encouraged to find other places in Curry County to build homes and invite other developers in to go through that process as Director Crockett briefly outlined. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I want to say I am 100% in favor of growing Curry County and producing more housing in a safe and protective manner. Mr. Christensen, if you wouldn't mind stepping up to the mic, you're more in touch with the issue that was there, and I'm not saying that there was anything really missed. And again, this isn't for this particular project anyway. This is forward thinking for new projects that are going to happen. That a sheriff's department goes in and says, hey, yes, okay, we're going to build 40 homes here. Okay, I know that I've got ingress and egress at these locations. That a roadmaster goes in and looks at the roads that are going to be put in there and says, well, they're only 14 feet wide because you're going to have a school bus come into this one. They maybe need to be 16 feet wide. And those kind of little things in the development and planning stage of that are helpful. They're not regulations necessarily, because I think everyone understands I'm not a regulation kind of guy either. But they're just safety issues that could be talked about. But if you wouldn't mind, just kind of discuss the issue you showed me.
Yes, well, basically, what I was asking, I was showing there were some minor problems, and we're working through them, but that I was used to an environment where someone like the Director of Operations led a weekly meeting where department heads from other departments, if they had a permit or a project or a subdivision, our department has a lot of facility plans that talk about storm drainage and roads, and other departments have their facility plans, and we all have our corner of projects. And so when a project first comes to our attention, or we're going to do a festival or some grant, that we have the department heads come together in a meeting. It's a private meeting with just our meetings with the department heads where we could talk, because, as you say, fire department has concerns with evacuation routes and things, and public safety with law enforcement and the building and planning and public works department. So I was just thinking that in the past experience, we had these meetings, and if we all had access to this agenda, we'd put items on this agenda, and if there's nothing on the meeting for that week, we wouldn't have the meeting. But if there was something, we'd all come together and we would all sign off on each other's item, and if someone had a piece of that, they would bring that to the person's attention that was going to issue that plan or that grant or that permit. So that's all I was looking at. And so I think some things could have, I'm pro-development big time, and I want to make things easier for contractors, but the last thing we want to do is come back afterwards and say, oh, by the way, we didn't think of this, or we didn't cover this, because that's really aggravating for contractors and the public as well. And so I think that, I hate having additional meetings and everything like that, but I think this would be maybe something to look at.
Commissioner Boyce?
Mr. Chair, explain that way. I got it, and I see that as possibly even an opportunity to speed up some of the planning and then permitting process. Hopeful, and bringing the community together, bringing the stakeholders together, all the above. If it could possibly be that as an avenue, and it doesn't scare developers away to thinking it's more regulation, we'll go to another state, or good. Thank you.
So, thank you, Mr. Christensen. I just would like to make a motion then that we ask Ms. Schmelzer to plan a workshop for this at the earliest convenience.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Aye.
Chair Paasch.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Next, we have D, designating. Let me see, we got a hearings at 11. Okay. Next, we have order designating Director of Operations Authority to select Curry County camp hosts following interviews and background checks and enter into the contract with the individuals. That's pretty self-explanatory, I think. Camp hosts are, you know, they're a part-time seasonal thing on some of them, I guess, and I think I'd like to ask that Ms. Schmelz would be able to do the background, you know, manage the background checks and enter into the contracts with those people.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Yes.
I'll second
Just-
that.
Council Huddle?
Thank you. I just wanted to say, when I looked at the order, it said appoint. I think also remove would be, it's probably implied in there, but it wouldn't hurt to say that, you know, she can also remove them,
Okay.
just if that helps the board.
So amended.
Okay, good.
Okay, I'll second the amended motion.
Discussion.
Further discussion?
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. We don't know how long Director Schmelz is going to be here. We don't know if the Director of County Operations will be long-term if she does leave. So I would table this for a while. I think the commissioners need to be more involved in some of these choices because we've had some, and that's no lack of confidence, generally speaking, for her ability. But if she's not here, I think yes, we could change it later on. But I think we should just table this a while. So based on that, I will oppose it, hopefully just temporary until we know what the future is going to be.
Well, I've spoken with her about this, and she is in the process of talking to some camp hosts and all that right now, and I think that I would trust her judgment on this. Again, like you just said, we can always change this if we get someone else after she leaves that we are not confident to do that. We can always go back and change this order.
I just think, if I may.
Sure.
I just think the commissioners need to, we're elected by the people. It's a big responsibility. We need to know and not just have a recommendation and then an introduction. We need to be in on the interviews, I think. We need to be in on the whole process and take that responsibility, good, bad, or indifferent. So that's why I'm going to oppose it, Mr. Chair, just for the time being at least.
All right, so we've got a motion, a second, and further comment?
I've got one small comment. By postponing this, I don't think it's going to help because we need to get these camp hosts in place. And by the time they go through probably several meetings plus interviews, it's going to take a much longer time. So I think we need to move on this.
Okay.
Let's not be in a hurry.
Roll call.
Mr. Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
No?
Chair Paasch.
Aye.
Motion carried 2-1.
All right, we are against the hour. It is 9:58. We're going to take a 15-minute recess. We'll be back at 10:15. We will hold off on the public hearing and go into commissioner updates. Commissioner Gold.
I've been working with All Care in looking at grant applications for COVID-related recovery, and they had a total of $50,000, and we've pretty much exhausted those funds, getting them out to worthy entities, like Wally's House was one of them, and the coastal, I can't think of the name, but they are helping individuals get food and so forth, the food banks. So there's been some really worthy causes getting this money that has come from the state.
Okay.
So that's it.
All right. I really don't have a lot other than it saddens me to see the state of our country right now and what's going on with it, not only with the COVID, more of a general thing with this rioting. I can understand the reasons and the sadnesses that the family faces, but to have these basically criminals come out and vandalize our stores and shoot police officers, shoot citizens. I happen to see, I believe there were 3 officers in one of the central states that were all shot, involved in gunfire, and one of the comments from one of them was that they thought to return fire, but were concerned of the consequences to that. When law enforcement starts to second guess when they're being shot at, if they should return fire, it's a sad state. And again, I 100% agree. There are some police out there that shouldn't be police, and that's the absolute truth. What happened, from what I saw in the video, I don't know what happened before that, but from what I saw in that video, that person shouldn't be police, and he shouldn't be walking the streets. And I have questions for the other ones that watched. But this is a country founded on laws, and we have to understand that our law enforcement we have to trust that. And I completely trust our sheriff. I completely trust the law enforcement in this county. And I would hope that if these people are planning on coming here, they get ready for what they're going to get in Curry County, because I don't think Curry County will stand for a lot of what we've seen in New York City and some of these other cities across the country. And I don't believe our sheriff will stand for it either. Again, we're a bedroom community here of a lot of great Americans, and it really saddens me to see what's happening in this country. And we must understand that change is coming everywhere in America. I believe the America that I grew up in will never be again. And we need to have citizen involvement and work with our sheriff's department and make sure that we are protected, our families are protected, and those that cannot protect themselves are protected. Those are my comments. Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that you referenced the video, the George Floyd murder. It's one of the three most disturbing things I've ever seen. And there's just no, the rule of law is the process, but people were begging him to let him up. And it was too late, if he even had intentions. So thank you for referencing that. Also, thank you for referencing the law enforcement we have in Curry County, through the Sheriff's Department, certainly through the three city police departments, very well managed. Your reference also, if I may, to the question, the split timing they have to make a decision whether they should fire back. That's hurting our recruitment, our young people going into law enforcement. And as we age, hopefully be on the planet another 20 years or so, most people in this room, we're going to be counting on those people who have the highest ethics, the highest integrity for the task and the job and the public service. And they understand the risk going in that I referenced earlier, the toll it can take. And we've talked a lot about that in our board, and I really felt almost a safety and encouragement. And you just referenced it, which this is a time to stand for peace and to bring this entire county together, this entire state together, this entire West Coast together, this entire country. And we have to be fierce on that and do our part. And I'm a little more optimistic than you, but I'm also, there's optimism, there's pessimism, and there's realism. And realism sometimes opens our eyes. But we still live in the greatest country in the world, and we still have opportunities to affect change. That's why we're on this board, affect positive change. And every day we need to be on our toes, engaged, and supporting those people that are absolutely putting their life on the line. I'm not anticipating anybody coming into our county, and I'm asking them not to. We're asking them not to. We want peaceful demonstrations. We want to know what happened to that man that was murdered and why, and how common this is in our country. So I want to read something just from the Secretary of State. We have a short presentation today, but this is from Bev Clarno. She's done an audit on child care safety, calling for improvements to provider background checks in Oregon. Forgive me, this public needs to hear this, because we need foster parents. We need families supporting kids that need home. So checks and balances, background checks in Oregon's sex offender registry. So just real quick, Mr. Chair, 3 paragraphs. Well, Salem, Oregon, while the vast majority of state-approved critical care providers do not have criminal convictions, auditors found agencies have approved some providers with histories of concerning convictions or substantiated child abuse or neglect allegations. And then there's a link you can go to. The audit also raises concerns with the state sex offender registry, including alarming delays in listing offenders on the public registry website. So not only do we have a shortage of foster parents, but we're a little delayed in being careful who might become qualified. New federal regulations set in 2017 require enhanced background checks for providers and their staff and expressly disqualify individuals certain criminal backgrounds, such as being a registered sex offender. The audit found both agencies charged with conducting background checks, the Oregon Department of Education and Department of Human Services, had approved providers convicted of the new federal qualifying crimes. Both agencies also took prompt action to remove those providers from their programs, which included 70 providers the agency identified and 20 additional provider auditors found. There's more. Citizens can contact me if they want the full report from the Secretary of State's office. One more. This morning I heard from Congressman DeFazio's office, Ed McGlone, who's his second in command. Dear friends, this morning Chairman DeFazio has introduced his Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill, the Investing in a New Vision for the Environment and Service Transportation Invest in America Act. This transformative bill will invest nearly $500 billion into surface transportation over the coming 5 years, including a 57% increase in funding for transit. Money coming back to the states, of course. And a climate title that meaningfully addresses climate change. That's controversial, and we have differing views on the level of the importance there, but well noted. I wanted you to be among the first to get a copy of the bill, as well as attached section-by-section summary and thematic, not heard that word before, thematic summary document. The committee will mark up this bill on June 17th, and we expect that a floor vote will happen in the first week of July. Stay tuned. He's going to have a conference call. I think you two also, of course, got that email. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. One more thing I want to talk about so that the citizens are aware. We did enter into a Phase 2 letter with our Ms. Cherie Ward of Public Health sent the letter yesterday to the governor's office. We do qualify for Phase 2, and so we have applied for Phase 2. And I believe, and I'm not certain on this, but I believe she did say that we were approved for it unless they come up with something late. So I believe Phase 2 will take place on Friday. They'll open for Phase 2 on Friday, barring any changes. If there are, we will try to make the public aware of it immediately. But as of now, we just wanted to let the public know that we have applied for Phase 2, and it has been approved, I believe. So, Commissioner Boyce?
That was done in one page, too.
Yes.
Quite good. Short, but yeah, very well done. And I've not heard that it's been approved. I'm anxious, of course. I know our citizens are anxious. We have, until Friday, the 21-day deadline.
Well, I might want to change the word approved by the governor's, regulations. We fully qualify for it, so there's no reason for it not to be approved.
Well said.
All right. So with that, it is 10:25. We are going to enter, because we've got a public hearing at 11, so we've got some time. We're going to enter into executive session. And I'm not going to read all these off to the letter, but it's 1926602A, 6602B, 6602F, and 6602H. We will come back into session after our executive session is finished and or at 11 o'clock for our public hearing. So this meeting is in recess.
1870 to aid shipping generated by gold mining and the lumber industry. The 93-foot-high Yaquina Head Lighthouse is the tallest in Oregon.
June 3rd, lost my date there for a minute. Our next item on the agenda is a public hearing, and the public legal notice states that Curry County Board of Commissioners will hold a public hearing on June 3rd at 11 a.m. in the Board of Commissioners meeting room, County Office Building on Moore Street in Gold Beach to consider a petition to vacate the roads and alleys in Block 15, Pacific City, Plat Number 2, located on the south end of Flores Lake, described as lands within T31S, R15W, Section 17 in Langlois, Oregon, 97450 under ORS 368. The road vacation relates to the agreement between the county and the state of Oregon to swap lands. The public is invited and encouraged to attend. So this hearing is now in session.
Just give a brief staff report, and then you can open the public hearing. Essentially, agenda item, this is 8B for the most part. You had the notice. This is the public hearing. We gave the public hearing the notice. The petition came to the board. The board initiated it. They directed the roadmaster to make a report. The roadmaster has made a report. It is in the packet. It's page 6 of the packet, and I confirmed with the roadmaster earlier. He asked if he needed to be here for this. He said there's really no use for those roads to the county, which is one of the standards. So he said there should be no harm to the county for vacating these roads. So really, that's all I had, and then you can take public comment.
All right, at this time, I'm going to open to public comment. Do I have any public comment? Come to the microphone and identify yourself, please.
Is this the one?
Yeah, taller one, either one.
Okay,
Pull it down a little bit to you.
Okay, there we are. Hello, everybody. Good morning. It's good to see you. I couldn't not come today. I sent you an email this morning and just want to urge you on behalf of our members and many people in Langlois who are also not coming down because they're staying at home to just move forward with this. And we really appreciate staff and commissioner support in moving it forward. So I just wanted to voice that.
Thank you.
And also ask what are the next steps. If maybe Mr. Huddle could explain that.
Thank you. So the only next step that I'm aware of is a partition then. So this is a vacation of the roads, and then, as you know, this was a big block of property, but we only are giving part of it to the state in exchange, and so we need to partition it off so we can do the transfer, and so that'll be the next step.
Yes, Mr. Assessor.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jim Colin, Curry County Assessor. I apologize for not really looking at this agenda item until this morning. I think maybe the order may have a couple of issues, and maybe John can clarify that for me. But with regard to what you just said with regard to a partition, John, I don't think there's going to be any partition required here. Really, when the county deeds this property to the state, you'll just be writing a legal description for the property that gets deeded to the state. It won't, the property is already all partitioned, and it won't require any other formal process that way. So if you need help,
there's more than one way to do things, and so we'll look into that. But what do you got to say about the vacation part?
Okay. In the second whereas, these specific roads and alleys are owned by Curry County, and this may be semantical, but I tend to think of roads and alleys that are dedicated to the public as being owned by the public. So I don't know if that's the appropriate language there.
I think it's, again, there's more than one way to do it. I think this is perfectly fine, and it's odd. When I look in our GIS system, if you've ever done it, and then you put your cursor on a road, it actually doesn't say it's owned by the public, it says it's owned by the county. So, and actually I think we hold roads in trust as they're kind of like a super easement, and if we pay for use of the public right away, but we own them and they're restricted on these, it's fine. I don't think
and I defer to you on that. I just tend to think of it as being a publicly owned property. And then, but in your now therefore area, number one, subject property described in Exhibit A. I know that I worked with Schmauser on this with regard to the legal description of the roads and alleys that would be vacated, and actually the county roadmaster gave you a very good legal description for the roads and alleys that would be vacated in the first paragraph of his report that you got on April 20th. The reason I bring this to your attention is I think in this order, your whole Exhibit A page just would create confusion to the public in the future. It's not a good description for the roads and alleys and it does not follow the map that the roadmaster provided for this vacation. And like I said, I had talked to Schmelzer about that. She said she was going to get it corrected. I don't see that correction here in this order.
Okay, so let me see if I'm tracking what you're saying. And the Exhibit A was developed by the state of Oregon and given to us, which is what they understood was going to be vacated. If I'm understanding you correctly, the Exhibit B is a roadmaster report, and then Exhibit A of Exhibit B is the map that you held up with the hash marks. And if I'm understanding you correctly, the map with the hash marks is what's being vacated by this order.
I think that's what's intended to be vacated by this order.
Okay.
But you have Exhibit A, the page that looks like this.
Yep.
That came from the state.
Yep.
And I believe that's the Exhibit A that is referred to in your now therefore section. The subject property is described in Exhibit A.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's this Exhibit A.
Yes.
This is a bad description.
Okay. Because
it doesn't vacate the same, it doesn't describe the same properties as are depicted in this map.
So on Exhibit A, I'm looking on the right-hand column, and it says lots to be transferred. That has nothing to do with the vacation. That'll be the partition or the transfer. Streets to be vacated. So O Ave from the terminus to First Street, Fur terminus to terminus, Flores First. So you're saying that the streets to be vacated and the alleys to be vacated, described in those two columns on the right side of Exhibit A, do not match up with the hash marks on Exhibit.
That is correct.
Okay.
The hash marks described on the map vacate additional property that is not described in this legal description.
Okay.
And I went through all that with Schmelzer.
Okay. And that's a issue from the legal point of view. The practice is usually you have a county surveyor, and here Jim Colon has kind of filled that role, but it's usually a matter left to the land describing experts, which is usually surveyors, to examine that. So I didn't cross-check the exhibits.
I will tell you, I did talk to the roadmaster about
Yeah.
that, and he disagreed with this legal description as well.
Okay. Well, I have a question. Ann, maybe, could you come on up? We're still in the public hearing. Have you had a chance to look at the exhibits on
I have
this?
not. I did not look at the exhibits.
Okay.
I was just kind of along your lines, trusting that the county roadmaster
Okay.
made the correct description, but I don't have it with me now, so I
Okay.
can't look at it. But I am
So
familiar with it if I could look at it, but I don't.
that's okay. And if the board is okay with the testimony of Assessor Colon, in my opinion, the way to correct it would be the subject property described in, and instead of saying Exhibit A, we'd just say Exhibit B. Exhibit A, according to the assessor and as he says, the roadmaster, not accurate, but Exhibit B is, so.
Proceed.
Okay.
Well, I'm wondering, do we want to make sure of the clarification on this before we approve it, or are we've
Well-
got Richard Christensen as the roadmaster saying that he agrees with the assessor that this is wrong?
Well, I didn't talk to him about that part, but his letter is Exhibit B.
I see that.
And as his Exhibit B, he has his own Exhibit A of Exhibit B with what he believes is being vacated. And Director Schmelzer apparently checked with Assessor Colon, and they were going to correct it, but it didn't get corrected. So really, and I recommended Assessor or Director Schmelzer go to the surveyor, but you know, Jim's got certain knowledge on property descriptions and stuff, but I don't think he's a surveyor. Anyway, you could even continue this item, but I think you just have to go on what evidence do you have here. For me, I like pictures. I really don't know what these streets to be vacated are on the state prepared exhibit, but it's easy to see with the hash marks exactly what we're doing. And you know, the funny part is if it's not acceptable to state, we can come back and fix it, or we can continue it and try to make sure everybody's on the same page. I just, you know, part of this is, it's a team effort, and that was not my part of the effort there.
Commissioner Boyce?
I don't see any reason we can add the document with the note, proceed, this is accurate, is an accurate part of the description. And thank you, Eric. I'm ready to make a motion, Mr. Chair, that if we add item B, attachment B, as the proper exhibit A and B both, and B as the primary agreed, subject to that approval, agreed document and property description.
Commissioner Gold, did you have?
Not continue.
I was just going to say, if we put in the motion that the property description be verified before we sign it, that would be, I think that would be okay. Is that correct, Council?
State has to verify it.
The state has to verify it?
Well, I don't know that the state does have to verify. And the odd part is, I'm assuming we gave the state notice of this action.
Yes.
And that if they had any issues, they would have spoke up. So
Public comments are still open, so go ahead, Mr. Cole.
So if you use the legal description that's provided by the county roadmaster and his department, you'll actually be giving the state a little bit more property than what they asked for. I can't see where they'd object to that.
and again, this action is not we're not transferring to the state any property. All we're doing is vacating county roads. Whether the roads we vacate are in or out of, I mean, we could have vacated all the roads up there in Pacific City if we wanted to, but we didn't. We're just trying to do the ones in the state area. If we over vacate, that doesn't mean the state will get more property.
In my opinion, if you keep this Exhibit A in your order, it will confuse the public record.
Understood.
And if there isn't an issue with it, I don't know whether you can make a motion such that you re-describe the roads and alleys to be vacated as that description provided by the roadmaster. You're the legal guy, John, but I hate to see this go in at all. I wouldn't mind having you rewrite Exhibit A to include really just this section of the roadmaster's report. It's clean and it's not confusing whatsoever. It's not my decision. You do whatever you want to do. I just hate to see the public record get confused. We may all understand what it is we're thinking now, but 10 years from now, this will be confusing the way it is.
Understood. Ms. Felicis, I was thinking we could just unwind the whole deal and start over.
I was worried you were going to say that, Commissioner Paasch. Since we've come so far, and since the legal descriptions of the property themselves for the exchange have really already been verified, and we've gone back and forth on those, I think, a number of times in an earlier process, including going to the State Parks Commission, and I mean, on and on. It seems like that descriptions of the property are really the most important thing. And I'm wondering if we could remedy what your concern is, Assessor Colon, by just removing the map and having the property descriptions, if we trust that the roadmaster did a good job at doing that. And because the map that's most important probably is the boundary of the property. So that's just a thought I would try to contribute to figuring out how we can move it forward without getting stopped.
Counselor, are you okay with using the roadmaster's description?
Personally, I think the risk of confusing the public is very minimal on this. I understand what Commissioner Cole is saying, accuracy is key. I think just leaving it as is, especially given the fact that we're transferring this whole thing to the state, we're never going to use those roads out there. I mean, I hate this phrase sometimes, but letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think we're kind of trying to solve a problem that may be more theoretical than actual.
But the roadmaster's report will be included in this, and that there lies the possible confusion.
Well, the roadmaster's report describes the alleys and blocks and has the map, and I think having the roadmaster's report and the map is good, and I would just say, instead of just saying Exhibit A, just say Exhibit A and B.
That's simple.
And Schmelzer might have already cleaned this up. We just don't know.
I don't know that either, but I can have Brenda add
Okay.
Exhibit A and Exhibit B, and then
Fine.
I think we've covered it.
Do we have any further public comments?
John, in this case, maybe I'm going to have to disagree with you.
Mhm.
I don't think it's a theoretical confusion. I don't know whether or not you can put this map up on the screen, and I can show you what some of the issues are.
I don't.
Do you have
If you have the mouse, you could put the map up on the screen.
Do you have a recommendation for us, Assessor Colon?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
My recommendation is to rewrite Exhibit A.
And not just do A and B as be essentially
I
superseding
think
Exhibit A.
A and B confuses things.
So why don't we do that, rewrite it, and then bring it back on the 17th?
But we can make an approval action item today based on that plan.
Here's what you
Correct?
can do. You can direct staff to bring back a final order with the corrected Exhibit A, and for approval on a consent agenda. We don't need more public hearings or anything like that.
Great. Is that motion clear enough?
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Close the public hearing?
Yes, we are closing the public hearing, yes.
Thank
Sorry.
you. It's okay.
Further discussion? Roll, please. I was waiting for you to get in the pocket, JJ.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Yes.
Chair Paasch.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
I don't think he needs a mic.
All right, also, coming out of executive session, staff is to proceed as directed from our executive session. 11 is now moot because we pulled that from the consent, and we have nothing. In the other column, anyone have anything further?
No, but thanks for asking.
With nothing further, this meeting is adjourned.